right, everybody, we're going to get started. Ashley, can you call the roll?
Of course. This is a joint economic development. Excuse me, everyone. All right, this is a joint economic development and governmental affairs committee meeting. Of the Economic Development and Governmental Affairs Committee, we have a quorum. Councilmember Willard.
Here.
Councilmember Hughes. Here. Councilmember McCarron. Here. The first item of business is approval of the minutes of the February 24, 2026 Economic Development Committee meeting. All right, thank you. And the next order of business is approval of the minutes of the April 16th, 2026 Governmental Affairs Committee meeting. Thank you. And next up, we have the Department of Safety and Permits with the presentation.
Right. Thank you, Ashley.
You're welcome.
While Director Kirby comes down, you can come down. I just wanted to say that today's focus for our committee meeting is on safety and permits and that entire process. We've heard for years that City Hall can be a barrier to economic development because of some of the systemic challenges that went on at safety and permits. The departmental data shows that safety and permits processes around 5,000 permits a year. In 2018, the amount of time it took for an applicant to hear back was about 2 days. Last year, it was about 7 days. Contractors have said that construction permit timelines in New Orleans can be 3 or 4 times longer than in neighboring parishes like Jefferson and St. Tammany. We actually had a principal located in District B who told me the only way to expand her school's project and get it across the finish line was to go through a month's delayed process, get pro bono land use support from a consultant, and then concierge support from the City Council. And we've invited some community members to come today because this is a collaborative process. And our goal is really to turn that around. We want anybody in the city who wants to get a permit to build a home or a business to have a reasonable sense of those rules, the timelines that they can expect, and the level of service that they are expected to receive in this great city. We all know we can do it, and honestly, we don't have a choice but to do it. So I'm very excited to have you here before us today, Director Kirby and your team. Look through your presentation. It looks great. We've met 3 times or so in preparation for this meeting, so I want to thank you and your team, the CAO's office, the Office of Performance and Accountability, for taking this process seriously, because we all know that this can be a linchpin to whether the City of New Orleans succeeds or continues to flounder. So I'm excited to have your leadership at the helm of safety and permits. And with that, I will turn the meeting over to you to go into your presentation.
Thank you.
So I'll start. Good afternoon. My name is Austin Wiltie. I'm the Deputy Chief Administrative Officer for the City of New Orleans. The mayor has consistently told our community that the city is open for business. Our team shares that vision. I'm delighted to be here today to present progress updates on the assessment and plans for the New Orleans Department of Safety and Permits. I'm joined at the table by our Interim Director of Safety and Permits, Ms. Susanna Kirby, and Cameron McPhee, Associate Director of the Office of Performance and Accountability. Director Kirby will be giving the presentation today. Director McPhee will be available to address any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy CAO, and thank you, Councilmember Willard. I've enjoyed the collaboration and my short time here working together and seeing the support has been extraordinary. So I want to thank you for that. And thank you for inviting community members, because the only way we are going to make this work is to work together through that. So I just will take some time today. You know, I've been here just over 6 weeks, right? And, you know, I see people coming to work and working hard every day to try to get things done. But admittedly so, we have not provided, apologies. We have not provided the level of customer service that this community deserves. And so that is what my dedication is towards, and what we'll spend the first part of my presentation talking about is immediate results we can see with customer service improvement and engagement with the community. And then on the back end, we'll talk a little bit more about the data and operational components of things we can change, okay? But please feel free to stop me at any time. So if you can go back just
back
one,
one.
sorry.
Yep.
Oh, okay, go for it. So this, the first slide that Cam's gonna go, I'm sorry, go ahead. Is just a refresher. I'm sure most of you already know what falls within safety and permits. So a lot of the focus I know does fall on building permits specifically because of the intensive process, and it's definitely something that needs to be looked at. But what I want to stress is that there are many other layers and levels of permits, and my goal is to ensure that they are all treated with the same level of urgency and consistent response. So this, again, just a reminder of what falls under that. So I've spent, again, this time really listening to people in the community, city council, about what the pain points are. Of course, you know, we do know and own the issue of timely permit issuance. It can hold up businesses. There's been improvements in some parts, but in others not, that need to be looked at. Also just the lack of communication. And again, we're going to get to that in some future slides, but we need to be held accountable to that, set some goals, and be transparent in sharing that with the community. So we're going to improve frequency, quality of communication with applicants, and we're also going to address detailed internal policies and making that more streamlined for the community, making it easier for them to digest and understand, so there's not the back and forth that has typically happened within safety and permits. So this slide shows the commitment that not only I have, but the department, city council, the community all has to show swift action and improvement in making the department and safety and permits better. The first one I have on here is the temporary alcohol beverage outlet ordinance. I know we're very, very close. You know, it kind of languished for over a year without really any movement forward. We were able to engage the restaurant industry, the CAO's office, city council, and really just all come to the table. And this is going to help businesses open sooner, you know, close out any maybe minor issues they may have to finalize everything, but it's not going to prevent them from opening and serving the community. Well, also what I've heard a lot about is community engagement. So we have already started that, and kind of attacking that from multiple points, right? So Councilmember King is not here, but he put on a really successful job fair this week. My people actually had to go back and get more handouts because there was so much interest with people coming, so I think that's promising. We're going to be doing coffee chats in each one of the districts that's set up through the Department of External Affairs, Deputy CEO Laprioli's office, and other community events. So I would welcome any time you all would like me to come to your district to please just reach out to me. The last thing is more from the operational component, right? So one concern I heard is, you know, there's this back and forth and sometimes what's even seen as misinformation that's provided to businesses. We have to standardize that process. We have to do as much pre-planning on the front end to avoid these people from having to come back. So that is a work in progress. And what we see with all of these and why it's so important is that with the current budgetary constraints that we're under, we need to be creative with the resources we have now. So all of these are things we can act on right now and are doing and pushing forward that don't impact the budget. Now, of course, there will have to be some long-term solutions, whether that be through technology, hiring more people to get the job done, and we'll go through that through this presentation as well. But the real focus, and what I've seen too, is it falls way too often on city council to have to resolve safety and permit issues. And not okay, right? You shouldn't have to follow up. That's our job. And we are implementing a team that we hope to grow out into more of an account management function that will track that, follow up, and also present you with the data so you can see what type of concerns, questions we're getting through the community. So to do that, the next several slides are centered around this idea of a contact center or call center. So the first slide's more about the vision. So I call it the Spice Center. We like our spice here in New Orleans, but what it really stands for is safety and permits, information and customer engagement. And that last piece is really important, right? So you're gonna see some metrics in the next couple slides that tell a story about why this is important, but it's really about answering the phone when it rings, helping walk these customers through their questions, and as much as possible getting it resolved for them on that first phone call, and if not, a follow-up process for that. So the second slide is that metrics, and as we move through these, you'll see different data points, and I just stress that the data is important once we quality check it to really ensure that we're using it to make actionable goals, right? So what this shares right now is we're only answering the call less than 80% of the time. There is room for improvement, right? That's 1 out of every 5 calls that's not getting answered. So what you see on the right-hand side is that, and what the goal needs to be. So what that indicates to me is that we don't have enough people answering the phones right now. So we need to staff that up, shift our resources, and then look at, do we have enough personnel to do that? Or what kind of additional training do we need to have people answering the phone and answering those questions? The next slide just goes with the metrics. And I think what it says, so I focus a lot on the drop call rate because I would tell you that's just a personal passion of mine, having worked in customer service organizations in the past. But we see other rooms for improvement too. And again, why data is important. So you can see that average answer speed. So people are having to sit on the phone for over a minute on average before we even answer the phone. Room for improvement there. Again, if we shift our resources, we should see a change. What you'll see the increase in is the average handle time. So, this is a target goal. I don't know that it's 100% where it needs to be, but I would imagine with my vision of 1 call resolution that you would see that increase. So just wanted to point that out. And another thing that I'm pretty passionate about and I really want to make sure we can get implemented is some kind of customer satisfaction survey so that we can really measure our progress and see where we may need to make changes in the future. This is the last slide I have on call centers, I promise. But it's just it's a 90-day plan. And so if we think about breaking this out into phases, training for the various personnel that might be answering the phones and how we would see that through, that's what this targets. This next slide, again, it's just another data point, and this is for walk-ins. So a shift from the call center to how many people walk into our lobby. Again, first quarter of 2026, a little over 3,000. And what this tells, I think, is actually a good story. Not everything's bad, right? I will say I am learning AI, and this helped me generate my presentation today. I am not perfect in that, so this slide I will point out right now has a couple of mistakes in it. I apologize. Once I present this to you again in the future, that will be corrected. So it's obviously not sorted by the longest wait time, but kind of your top 4 is the shortest wait time. So the blue is how long someone waited in the lobby before someone came and got them. The pinkish red is how long we took average to serve those customers in the different categories. And again, why it's important and something to monitor is, if we see that blue line shifting in the wrong direction, how do we need to shift our resources to address it? And we would drill down into that.
Director Kirby, just looking at the walk-in metrics, do people does it take them more time if they come in as opposed to if they're calling? I mean, I know you have to come in for certain things you can't call about, but I was trying to see if there's any type of correlation between the walk-ins and the calls.
Yeah, so I think you're talking about dispositions, and that's great. It's not something, I have it broken down by area, but I don't have it broken down necessarily by disposition, but I think that's a great idea that we should incorporate that in Walk Center.
Okay.
I will tell you just, I don't want to speculate too much, but what I would say is that walk-ins typically have lots of questions about the one-stop process they've already done, so we're walking them through those documents and what was right, and so that's not necessarily always as simple to do online or through email, right?
Okay.
Yeah. So the next few slides is something that I know my team is really excited about. Others within City Hall are really excited about, and that's permit stat. And sitting here to the left to me is one of the masterminds of this this tool that we're going to be using, right? And I've actually already used to help me develop some of my metrics and what I want to see different in the department. And so Cam McPhee is going to take just a few minutes to talk about permit stat.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Cameron McPhee, the Associate Director of the Office of Performance and Accountability. Thanks for having me. I'm going to talk about Permit Stat, which in a nutshell is a performance management program. The Office of Performance and Accountability, working alongside Safety and Permits, the CAO's office, and ITI, is diving into the data that Safety and Permits produces every day. Permit data, license data, zoning project data, plan reviews, and more. We're conducting process mapping across each of those areas, identifying the right key performance indicators and benchmarks, and meeting regularly to analyze that data together so we can spot bottlenecks and figure out how to reduce or eliminate those bottlenecks. The 5 components on this slide identify exactly how we put that into practice. When we talk about spotting bottlenecks and figuring out how to reduce or eliminate these are the specific mechanisms to make that happen. Each component builds on the last. You can't identify the right projects without good data, and you can't hold anyone accountable without a regular forum to do so. Think of these 5 elements as the engine behind the program. From, excuse me, Oh, this got out of order, sorry. From structure to impact, the working group and bi-weekly meeting format is what meeting regularly to analyze the data together means. In practice, it's a disciplined, structured cadence and not an ad hoc conversation. Slide 3 here shows where we're headed. We're starting with building permits, trade permits, and plan review. And as the program matures, we expand the same approach to more permit types and case types and eventually make our progress public. Having Safety and Permits, OPA, and the CO's office and ITI all in the room together means that we're not just identifying the problems, we have the right people to actually resolve them. Thank you.
Okay, so one of the ways we're using this data, one of the ways we can use it, PermitStat, is what you have up here is an example of one of our more complicated permit types, right? So building, new construction, you can see there's around like 10 just safety and permit touch points, but there's also various other divisions, if you will, that are intersected in that. And so when we think about using a tool like PermitStat and the practicality of it, is being able to drill down on where something sits and be able to usher it along so that the customer's not waiting or having to follow up themselves, and we have our hands on that data and can move it forward. So I just thought it was a good illustration to show all the ways that we can see where potential bottlenecks are and address them by using the data. Okay. So really, what we see is, several challenges within safety and permits. We talk about, personnel, we talk about processes, we talk about technology, right? So, for example, you have inspectors that may only be certified in one thing, and the customer's having to schedule multiple inspections to get something done. that doesn't make sense. We at least what we can control inside, we need to get our inspectors cross-certified. You know, people don't have time to take off work and do multiple things. We need to make it's an opportunity for us to become more efficient. I spoke a little bit earlier about the standardized checklist. You know, there's concern that there's a variance in the process and what customers are being told based on where they're at. This will work to attack that. And then reviewing technology. Now, yeah, this is a longer term solution. We may not be in a situation where we can, you know, get that right now, but what technology is out there that can help us with reviewing plans, with applications, with, you know, helping us just understand and interpret the data to make it actionable even more. So this final slide, I know, is kind of a much debated issue within the permit universe, if you will, and that is third party versus city inspectors, which I just spoke about briefly. You know, right now, third party inspectors are critical here because as you'll see on the right-hand side, within safety and permits, we have 12 inspectors, and most of them are only certified in one area. And so, again, you know, you think about the customer service component, third-party inspectors are available on weekends and after hours, and so that's a need that we can't meet yet, but it's worth looking at and exploring to gain efficiencies within the entire process for the customer. So in closing, I just want to emphasize my commitment, the department's commitment to these changes and this continuous improvement. We're modernizing processes, we're strengthening communication, and ultimately improving the customer experience. Every one of these changes supports a more resilient, equitable, and just economically vibrant New Orleans, which is what we're here for, right? We love our city, and we need to not be a barrier to these businesses. And that is my commitment to not just you guys, but to the community as well. So that's my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Director Kirby. You fantastic presentation. First, we'll go to Council President Morrell.
Thank you. As you know, I want to talk about third-party inspections. As you know, the public has kind of found the third-party inspection situation kind of jarring in that we have a major operator inside of one of the third-party inspection companies in the middle of a very massive federal investigation. And there is a lot of trepidation when you have individuals in a given company who can be accused, even convicted of inspection fraud in multiple jurisdictions, and yet they're still the largest company doing it in the city of New Orleans. And when I've spoken to different groups, there seems to be, from the outside looking in, a perception of favoritism towards one group over another, which has kind of led to a reluctance of other organizations coming up to be alternatives to the larger organization that's currently here. So I think what we're looking for, at least I'm looking for, is I think there needs to be a clear process for certifying third-party inspectors, and it needs to be advertised so people can see that, listen, if I want to start a company doing third-party inspections, here is the criteria and checklist, here's how easy or hard it is to get done. I also think, because you certify third-party inspectors, there has to be some consideration that if you have a company that runs into problems in this jurisdiction or other jurisdictions in regards to convictions of bribery or the like, there has to be a repercussion for us in this jurisdiction. Because if you've got a company, any company, that runs into issues where they seem to be defaulting or rigging inspections, we have to be able, as a city, to say, we acknowledge that and we're revisiting their certification, because what happens if you've got a group that gets, let's say, convicted of some kind of inspection issue in 2025 and a building falls or collapses in 2026, it's the same company. I feel like from my perspective, at least morally, at the very least, the city doesn't have clean hands at that point. If you see something and someone says something, you have to go back and revisit those with inspection. So I know that we need, because of the fact that we don't have enough internal inspectors, we have to use third-party inspectors, but I do believe we have to keep a close eye and close oversight over those third-party inspections.
1,000,000%, and I couldn't say it better. I am happy to work with anyone that thinks they would want to come to New Orleans and start that up to talk them through the process.
Councilmember McCarron.
Well, thank you all for the presentation. This is a great start. I know we've had several meetings about stuff too, so I appreciate this presentation. I want to go back to the call center, or both walk-in and call center. Do you have, is it the same people that are taking the phone calls that are doing walk-ins? And are these specific customer service representatives, or is it also, your inspectors that are also doing other work but also having to answer phones?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head, Councilmember McCarron. So one of the first things that I realized when we started looking at the data and talking is that, yes, a lot of the time the person that's assigned to what you would call phone duty or desk duty is also the person that has to go get that person that walked into the lobby, right? So first thing is, let's split that out. If you're on the phone, you can also, it's gonna crash at some point, right? Which we can see through the numbers. And you're also correct with inspectors, having to answer some of the questions, and that's where that cross-training is gonna be critical and come into play.
Do you have a plan? I mean, I know, look, we're tight with budget, but do you have a plan for eventually making the call center just specific customer service representatives that can kind of help? That way inspectors can focus on doing their inspections and permit processing, that sort of thing. I mean, what's the sort of long term?
Yeah, I do want to see the data for probably the next couple months, in all honesty, to see if there's a trend in the phone calls or the types of calls we're getting, so that I staff it appropriately, one, with the right number of people, but then, yes, what classification does that really belong with?
Okay.
So I am developing a plan. I would like to see this implemented and through in a little bit more data first, though.
Okay, good. The other question I have about permit stat, are you guys using that on a case-by-case basis, or are you using it for all permits that are, I know you're starting with new construction, but how is that work?
Yeah, we are taking all the data that is produced in the software the department uses. We are specifically focusing on a few case types, but we look at all of the instances within those types.
Okay. For permits in general, so we have a few residents when they reach out to us regarding the status of their permit, that it's been determined the application is on hold pending payment. Is there something that notifies, what's the notification process for residents to pay, and that way they maybe don't have to call our office?
It should be triggering an email to whoever did the application. And so what I have seen a couple times, say your contractor, for example, is the one who has the login and is doing the process, and it's gone to maybe their general email or something like that. It seems to be getting lost, but that is the mechanism for it to get there, short of logging into One Stop and seeing.
Okay. And then a couple other things that you and I have talked about specific to special event permits that come to district offices, making us like the last stop, making sure that every step of the way is completed first, like fire, police, whatever else needs to happen. Have you guys sort of implemented any changes to that system and that approval process?
I will say it's a work in progress. We have relayed the message. It's where that coordination piece comes in, right? And a little bit more account management, especially, working with the various departments outside of safety permits and seeing if we can come to some kind of resolution to that queue and how it should go to prevent those Friday 6 o'clock calls for you guys. But I know not a great answer yet, but it is on the radar and work in progress.
Great, thank you. And my last one is about meter releases. That's another one that comes to our office a lot. What's the
Yeah, definitely a pain point. We actually recently hired a new building manager who, if we go to the inspector side, he's actually a CBO, so he's commercially certified. We hope he is starting May 11th, around the middle of May. And so that's going to be a huge help to get rid of the backlog. It's essential. It's one of those things, right, where only a few people can release those, and we admit that it has become a backlog, but that the plan, once we bring this additional resource on, I expect that to go down substantially.
Okay, is there anything in the system that prompts someone in safety and permits that says, hey, this has been uploaded for whether it's a third-party inspector or whatever, and it's ready for meter release?
Yeah, so
Something automated?
Yes, they do work off, reports in their queues daily and issue work. Just in full transparency, meter releases is one of those that has a backlog right now.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Councilmember Harris.
Yeah, just a couple of questions that are sort of scattered shot. Cross-training the inspectors, what's the timeline on that?
I'd like to have it done by the end of this year.
Okay.
Ordering the books right now for them to study from so they can start immediately.
And then you said we have, 12 inspectors?
Correct.
And are you looking to hire more?
It is on the plan.
How many more?
I wouldn't want you to quote me on a number today. I do have an idea of how many, maybe this will be helpful just for context. Third-party inspectors right now, there's about 25. And they're able to get through, I think the number was around 5,500 in the first quarter, and we've done just over 3,000 with 12. So if that, kind of.
So if we could hire 13 more people, then we'd be on par with the private inspectors.
Right.
Okay. You talked about people who are calling versus people who are walking in. Have you tracked how many people have called and then are asked to come in?
Oh, no, but I like that. No, yes, we can add that in the mix and as something to track. I have heard, I would say I've had people even come to my office saying, I tried to call, but, couldn't get an answer, and so now I'm here. So, no, noted.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think parking being what it is around City Hall, I think given the fact that we have so many walk-ins, we do need to take a look at automating some of this with technology. A standard permit, you shouldn't have to come down to City Hall in order to apply for it. That brings me to my next question about payments. Are we at the point where we are able to accept online payments for everything or just some things?
Thought it was everything, but let me double check that and I will get back to you.
Okay, yeah, please do, because my understanding is there are still things that people have to come down and present a physical check, and that's problematic because young people don't have checks. You have to come down to City Hall, and why should you have to make a trip when you can pay online?
So the one thing, go ahead. The one thing was trade licenses, because those are actual cards, so you can't email those. And so one of the requirements we did eliminate was allow for people to apply online, so you don't have to come in and do the paper application. I will have to double check on the payment for that specific one, because that's the only one I could think of that might be caught up in that.
I was just meeting with someone who runs Ferret Street Festival, and she's saying that vendors, each individual vendor has to come down to present a check in order to vend at the festival. Can you just double check that is or is not the case and let me know?
Yes, I have people taking notes for me, and I will definitely get that and I will let you know.
And that comes to communication. I know you said communication is key. Mm-hmm. Some of these things like checklists, when you don't have to come down here, you can just go online, all of that needs to be communicated to the public so that they understand that, hey, if you're a vendor at a special event, you don't have to come down here anymore. You can do everything online. What is your plan for communication?
Yeah, so specifically for the checklist, I think, once we streamline these processes and to educate the community, it's going to be through these community events. We're trying to work with the communications team to perhaps down the road revitalize our social media pages, Instagram, and then of course through the website. We would put it out there as well. So multifaceted. I don't know.
Okay.
Did that answer your question? Or not really?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it's a long-term goal of yours to communicate, but just keep in mind the city has its own social media. We each have our own social media, so if there are things that you would like to communicate about new processes for safety and permits, please use us as resources. As far as we each have town halls in our various districts, the at-large members have them throughout the districts. Come by and talk about the new streamlined processes. We invite you to do that.
Thank you.
And I guess I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that Isis and Kirsten both have been very engaged in helping us with this presentation. So I think just having experienced both administrations, the level of engagement that we're getting from them it's a higher level. So I'm optimistic.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, Councilmember Hughes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon. Just really wanted to get a status of your enforcement efforts. So, for example, how are zoning violations being addressed, such as mechanic shops operating in residential neighborhoods, and also commercial vehicles, including cars and 18-wheelers parked on residential properties. New Orleans East, I get numerous complaints, and I see them, big rigs parked in the middle of residential neighborhoods. So tell me about your enforcement efforts.
Right. So I kind of see that as two parts. I'll kind of talk about the first part too, that's lacking, but I think with additional inspectors, which again is part of the plan, we can be more proactive in finding unpermitted, unlicensed businesses out there and creating the violation cases and pushing them through adjudication before it even escalates to a point, right? So that's one component of it that I don't have a timeline on until I understand where we're at with bringing on more people and being able to attack that. And then I think the second part is the current status. So as zoning violations come in, we are sending inspectors out. I can get you a timeline on how those are getting addressed. I think the last part, and I might leave this for Austin to answer, is the adjudication piece. So levying the fines so that these businesses or people that are violating see it, understand it, and come into compliance. So I don't know.
All right, but let me delve into the 18-wheeler piece. So walk me through. If an 18-wheeler is parked in the middle of a residential neighborhood and an inspector goes out, walk me through then what happens.
Okay, so if it is against a zone, if it is a zoning violation, we will place the violation if the customer is there, we will try to engage with the customer and let them know that they are in violation and what they can do to come into compliance, but they will also be issued a violation letter.
So normally a big rig, for example, and I'm happy to bring you around New Orleans East.
Mm-hmm.
The owner of that rig is not necessarily parking in front of their house.
Okay.
They may be parking around the corner, they may be parking across the street, so the odds of you going engage with the person who actually owns the rig is slim. So, I mean, do you put a violation on the window, or how does that violation get to the perpetrator?
It's a great question. It's one that in the meetings we've had with Councilmember Willard, his team has brought up as it relates to dumpsters, to pods, things that are in the right-of-way where it's not clear who the parcel owner is, because of course that makes it difficult for us to pursue an adjudication that's in rem and attached to the property. And so we were brainstorming with him what that looks like. Does it, are you slapping a scarlet letter on that? Do you have citizens that are reporting this? What does that look like? I think we would be more than happy to coordinate with your offices onto what that looks like in terms of enforcement. The ones that are parked on private property are easier for us to enforce. But yeah, looking for plates or identifying information, on those dumpsters and pods on the right-of-way, I think would be the logical next step, but they're not always there, as we found. So I think we've had mechanisms in the past. I think illegal use cases and stuff we've done through safety and permits. So there are mechanisms to move them forward. I think just I mean, you'll hear today with transferring certain operations, parking, towing, we just need to know where that fits and who really has the bandwidth to take those prosecutions all the way through the adjudication process, and then, make sure we're collecting on the back end.
Yeah, I just think we have to put our heads together and I don't think it should be as complicated as it is, and maybe I'm missing the mark. If a resident parks illegally, they get a ticket. If they get too many tickets, then they get booted and or towed, right? So it's pretty clear cut. It just seems like we struggle, like nobody who owns a big rig is afraid because they can park it wherever they want, nothing happens. That's just the reality. And I can take you around New Orleans East. There's just far too many big rigs parked in residential neighborhoods on any given day. They're not afraid, and the residents are just fed up with it. So, the same way we ticket hardworking residents of this city, I'd like us to figure out a way. Obviously, there's license plates on these big rigs, right? So the only way we're going to change behavior is through meaningful enforcement, because enforcement is one thing, but if it's not meaningful, right? Like if you give me 20 letters in the mail and I don't lose my CDL or my truck doesn't get towed, it's meaningless. So the same way we aggressively boot and toll doing second lines and all these other great things, we got to figure out a way to finally put some teeth, and I'm happy to be a thought partner with you all.
I appreciate that. And I think the towing component and is what I've heard. Again, I'm speaking a lot of school here, but I don't know the capacity to be able to tow those big rigs to the Almanasser yard. That's been the conversations I've had. I'm not a subject matter expert on it, but I'm happy to dig into it with you.
Yeah, I look forward to working with you all.
What was running through my head is, we do these joint efforts with other departments and other types of violations. So think ATC, for example, or NOPD in certain situations. So I don't know why we couldn't do something like this with the traffic division in these, a joint effort. To me, it seems completely in line with what we're trying to do. So again, I'll reach out to.
Again, I look forward to working with you all. I know we can put our heads together and solve the problem. Thank you all. I appreciate it.
Council President Moreau.
Yeah, to Councilman Hughes' point, I mean, you can boot a big rig. And I will tell you that to Councilmember Hughes' point, it is infuriating to residents when their car will get booted on the street for a ticket. And if you want a consequence for bad behavior, not being able to use your illegally parked truck to go do things for profit is a pretty good consequence. And I think that as far as our legal standing, the city is well within its rights if you've got an illegally parked vehicle on any street on any given day to boot the hell out of it. So I do understand the capacity issue. I mean, right now, I've had conversations with many people within OPD regarding towing and just getting people to qualify to be a tower. It's problematic. But when it comes to booting vehicles, I think that is something we could do fairly quickly. I mean, for the most part, and Austin, you correct me if I'm wrong, we even hire third parties to boot vehicles. So, I mean, there's no reason why we can't pretty quickly contract with somebody with the capacity to boot big rigs, just start booting all of them. Because the reality is that if it takes us a while to find the owner, I promise you, when you boot the big rig, the owner will come looking for you because he's going to want to know how to get the boot off his car, and then you can give him whatever fine you want to give him there, or you could say, thank you for the new big rig that the city's going to sell off at auction. Either way, they will come see you if there's a boot or two on their big rig.
Absolutely. And I think, we've seen this playbook before. Councilmember Green's done this with graffiti. You make an example out of a few people. You have an education piece tied to it. I think we can solve this problem.
Yeah. So we'll keep working with you on that. One of the things I wanted to bring up was the land use barrier study that CPC put out last year. It issued a lot of recommendations related to safety and permits. One of them was about the notification process. So a question I have is, when an applicant uploads a new document, does safety and permits get that notification, or is that something that you guys have to manually check for?
Like you talk, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, the reason I ask is because in this study last year, part of the safety and permits process, they were saying that when an applicant uploads a new document that has to be reviewed, you don't find out until you go into Llama and you see that there's a new document pending for review. On the flip side, when you guys go into One Stop and make comments on an application, the applicant is not notified until they go into One Stop. To me, that's very efficient, and correct me if I'm wrong there, but to me, that's very efficient, and what you're doing is you're sort of arbitrarily increasing the time to close out permit applications, because inherently you're having a delay on when someone on your side knows that there's an application document that needs to be reviewed, and then on the back end the applicant has a delay because they're not checking One Stop every day.
So, yes, I took issue with the wording of it. I don't have it in front of me at the moment, unfortunately, but talked to Bob Rivers, Director of CPC, about this. If you do have it, the way it is worded is, I believe that's the perception, or that's the way that I think folks feel it works, or like that was the feedback. My understanding is a notification is sent. I was seeing if Becky Houtman was in the audience, because as soon as I read that, I had the same exact reaction, and I took it to our OPA team to fact check, and Becky confirmed that understanding. I don't want to give bad information to the public today, but I'm almost positive that it's just the semantics of how that's written.
Okay. Look, I just want to know what the answer is there, and if that's not the way it operates now, it needs to be, because anything that we can do to accelerate that process and eliminate those kind of inherent delays we should be doing. Director Kirby, you talked about using AI to help polish off your slide deck. I'm a fan. I think there's definitely some technology opportunities that can be implemented in safety and permits to help with some of this as well. Even something like low-hanging fruit, like an AI chatbot, that can help people, because that could eliminate some of those calls that you get, just, hey, where do I find this information, stuff like that.
It's funny you say that. I have met with several vendors here recently that kind of run that gamut and have had multiple of those suggestions, and so I'm kind of compiling all of that to present to the CAO, to you all, to anyone who wants to look at kind of maybe shorter term, more budgetary, conservative,
feasible.
Right, feasible, thank you. And then, like a full-blown shebang, right?
All right.
So that'll be coming in the next couple of weeks.
Okay. A couple other things that the study suggested that I just want to flag. It talked about issuing flowcharts and checklists. It seems like you're already going through that process. Some of that was laid out in your slide deck. Like I think it was Councilmember Harris said, anytime you get information like that, feel free to share it with our offices so that we can shoot it out, because we are, in constant communication with developers and homeowners that are navigating safety and permits. So we want to work with you on that process as well. It talked about an SOP manual for your staff, so I wanted to put that out there. And then holding pre-development meetings for large projects.
So we're actually piloting a couple of those over the next couple weeks.
Perfect.
And have done one with a recent one a week or so ago. And I will tell you, what I took away from that is that I need more than safety and permits in the room. So that's what I'm learning, right? Or who are the parties that need to be in the room to really make it constructive, right?
And the more you go through the process and the more you pick up on stuff like that, the shorter the timeline becomes. Because if in that first meeting you need, whomever there to help go through some of those initial questions for larger projects, you accelerate the timeline. So that's a great to hear about that. A couple other things that I want to touch on. You were talking about in the permit stat meetings, y'all go through some of the KPIs. I didn't see on the slides where you clearly say, like, these are the overarching KPIs for safety and permits. Are y'all still identifying that right now?
Yeah, I would say that this is the early developmental phase of the program. We have identified 4 that we're working with at the moment. We want to look at every appropriate key performance indicator, but as we build this, the foundation of this program together, we're just starting with a couple, and happy to get those to you specifically.
So what I would like to see is, like, whatever you settle on for your final KPIs, just let us know what those are so we can gauge the success and progress of safety and permits. But also if you can benchmark it for, like, where we are right now, where that KPI would be, and where you want it to be maybe in 12 months so that we can actually track that progress.
Yeah, that's almost entirely the point of the program. So
Perfect.
Very happy to provide that data to you.
Perfect. And then I know on slide 11, you were talking about kind of that public-facing dashboard. I just wanted to call that out. I think that is a great idea. And I know you guys have a lot on your plate, but if there was anything you want to share on that.
Yeah, I mean, the office is committed to transparency, and we want to provide the public with good information about the progress this department is making. And so the goal is to present a public-facing dashboard at some point.
All right, perfect. Well, we're excited about that. We certainly thank Mayor Moreno and the entire administration for their dedication to transparency and open communication, and we want to thank you all for coming down today. We have one public comment card from Morgan Clevenger. Thanks for coming today, Morgan.
Hello, good afternoon. Thanks for the opportunity to speak on this. As a citizen who uses safety and permits from a personal and business standpoint, and also from a neighborhood association standpoint, there's a lot of, issues that we would love to see addressed. I appreciate, Leslie, Councilman Harris's comment about the online versus paper, but we have to remember that a lot of people are still with paper, and also what we experienced when the whole system went down from being hacked. There were no paper copies of anything. There was nothing, and people lost months of work because there was no archive of anything to fall back on. So just keep that in mind. We'd also like to talk about 311. We're always told, call 311, call 311. Here's the situation with 311 for years. So the ladies are great. They take a great report. They give you an item number, or sometimes not. But then what happens after that? And that's where we see the big disconnect, and that we are continuing to call 311, and people just give up. We have a situation at Gentili and Castiglione for 3 years now, more than that, with some multi-agency issues, but we have not gotten safety and permits to get on board with that. And I'd also like to talk about clean zones, in residential neighborhoods. We know the oppression of clean zones and the oppression of opportunity around the Superdome, Essence Fest. But in Jazz Fest, it's a private event, and we are completely oppressed, the residents, by the clean zone, the geofence, the operations of a private event. And we are going to advocate for resident vendor permit, because thousands of people come to our neighborhood every year to sell every manner of things. But if Miss Celestine is on her porch selling pralines for $1,
Thank you so much, Ms. Clevenger. I'm sure somebody from Director Kirby's team would be happy to talk with you about the property at Gentili and Castiglione. All right. Well, thank you all so much. We really appreciate y'all coming down today.
Thank you for the time.
Have a good one. Council President Morrell.
Thank you. I think we're on item number 5. Yes.
Yes.
Come on, buddy. I know this is like your thing. We got Dave too, and Shannon. We got everybody. Yeah.
And Councilman Morrell, there are no online comments.
Oh, that's even better. I know. Well, I think this is more of them all saying they're going to collectively shoulder the burden of making this work.
I appreciate that burden you give me.
Boot and tow the 18-wheelers.
Nothing like more responsibility here.
Buddy, we only give you what you're capable of, man.
I know. I'll get them calls.
All right, so who's going to be in charge there? All right, presentation, let's go.
Council members, thank you for your time today. My name is Jonathan Wisby. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer for the city. I'm joined today by Deputy Director of DPW Shannon Oldfield Banks, by Lieutenant David Barnes, and by Captain Buddy Michaud. And I want to walk you through a couple of slides that describe the purpose, goal, and eventual outcomes of ordinance number 35425. First, I just wanted to start by framing this for everyone in terms of the overall logistical effort that this ordinance attempts to undertake and the amount of people that have been involved in helping to make this a success and bringing this language to you today. Besides the folks at the table here today, we have a core project team that includes a number of folks, Julia Zuckerman and Anita Curran from the council, Mark Salvador from CAO, Chris Ard from ITI, Tommy Milner from Law, and many others in finance, budget, civil service, DPW have really helped to bring together the project proposal you see before you today. The other thing to note here is really we envision this as phase one of a two-phase project, and so this phase deals with transferring parking enforcement and towing operations from DPW to NOPD, and we plan to come to you in the near future with a second phase to transfer the operations of the Grounds Transportation Bureau as well. But we are cutting it off in small pieces to be able to work through the significant language changes that you see before you. This is a very long ordinance, but what it aims to do is relatively simple. So in terms of the goals of this ordinance, really what it does is transfer legal authorities for parking enforcement, abandoned and nuisance vehicle enforcement, in custody over impounded vehicles from DPW to NOPD. This will now give NOPD the ability to run a parking enforcement division and associated towing division, and it clarifies some of the legalities regarding engaging private entities for towing and the fee collection associated to that towing and storage fee. Really what this ordinance before you is trying to address are a couple of core problems. I would say one of the most significant is we certainly have had reports over the years of potentially dangerous situations that the men and women of DPW have found themselves in, both parking and towing enforcement, and there's been a real need to really pair that with law enforcement that is able to de-escalate situations and be able to better contain those types of potentially violent incidents. It also really helps with coordination between NOPD and DPW. I will say they have really done an outstanding job up till this point of actively working together in coordination as two agencies, particularly around special events, but coordinating between two agencies will always be a little bit clunkier and more difficult than coordinating within a single agency with a single hierarchy. So the goal here is to place all these enforcement operations under a single hierarchy within NOPD and allow them to deploy parking and towing enforcement as part of their broader law enforcement duties. You know, this is, I think, especially meaningful when you get to special events, where, as I said, they've had close partnership in the past, but this will unify that command for the future. It will also have an impact on the city's broader effort to collect unpaid parking fees and fines by providing additional capabilities for going after parking debt. And then finally, we really believe the final outcome of this will be a cleaner public right-of-way that is free of nuisance vehicles to a greater degree. And then, you know, I really wanted to just sort of finish here by highlighting for you sort of three key elements of the next steps here and what we're working to do right now. When these ordinances, or if these ordinances are approved by the council, we then would provide notice to the impacted employees, which again would be the parking and towing employees with DPW, of their move to NOPD. The current ordinance has a effective date of May 31st. So if this was approved at, say, the next council meeting, we could then provide that notice. If there's, you know, additional debate required or we need to delay it, we can obviously revise the effective date. The city also has budgeted in funding for NOPD to hire an additional 50 parking enforcement officers and some towing officials as well this summer. They've already begun that interview process. They've been working very collaboratively with civil service to begin that process even in advance of this move. So they brought people in for interviews and have started that hiring process. And then, finally, Shannon in DPW has really committed to working with the employees that aren't going to make that transition from DPW to NOPD to ensure that they're integrated into existing operations in a way where they're able to continue their existing duties to the greatest extent possible. So those are really the primary elements I wanted to talk about with the legislation today. We're happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. I don't have any questions though, but there's quite a few. Councilmember Willard.
Just a couple of questions. So once the transition kicks in, will any of the parking enforcement responsibilities be under DPW? Will DPW have anybody dealing with that, or will it be purely under NOPD?
The ordinance moves that legal authority from DPW to NOPD, so that precise function will no longer be a DPW function.
Got it. Second, in your slide, you said this move allows NOPD to address the unpaid parking tickets. I just want to get a better understanding of that.
Yeah, so, one particular avenue that we had explored for collecting some of that parking debt was working in partnership with the Office of Debt Recovery at the state. They require the provision of certain personally identifiable information that DPW is not authorized to access.
Got it.
And so having it come from a law enforcement agency would enable them to collect that.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Councilmember McCarron.
Well, thank you all. I'm very excited about this move. Buddy, I just want to say this is not related to this, but thank you for taking my call this weekend with Jazz Fest and redeploying folks to help out with the illegal golf carts. I really appreciate, that helped neighbors and they were very happy. So appreciate that. The biggest thing for District A is the parking in the university area, and I think either Tulane PD or LUPD does not have ticket writing authority, and I think that would be something we should look into to assist you all with that, because that's where we get the most amount of parking complaints of people, students, teachers, whoever it is, parking in neighbors' spaces, and it's really a big problem. So I don't know if you've thought about that or...
Yes, ma'am. So I think what we need, the challenge is the equipment and making sure that they're logged into the system and have the proper training. I don't see, for instance, we've already branched out to the districts, some of the districts with parking enforcement controls that they're able to train on and be certified and log in, and they'll be able to also officers can now write more tickets as a result of this computer-based trend that we're using with their parking system. We're currently on DigiTicket, right? And I think the other device that DPW is currently on is another vendor. I've been in the works with talking with our technology people to see if we can just make all these civil infractions part of DigiTicket, maybe eliminate one of the vendors or whoever comes up with the best solution. I'm not an IT person, but that has been in the works. We're trying to get NOPD districts to be able to have their own ticket writer so we don't have to call for them in particular when they come across that violation. So I think it's a vendor technology thing that's something that's easy to access, just like if we gave them a ticket book, but it's going to be a handheld computer and printer that can photograph and do all that. And also, of course, just a couple hours of training.
Okay, great. Yeah, that would be a huge help to the university area. They would much appreciate that. I think that's all I've got. Thank you.
Councilmember Harris.
Hey, everyone. I've been talking about this since last term because we've had, Shannon, as you know, a lot of issues everywhere, especially in the CBD, where we can't get after-hours towing, where, for example, Chick-fil-A, people are double parked and the poor parking enforcement folks are getting screamed at, cussed at, et cetera, and there's no real backup for them to de-escalate. So I'm really excited about this effort, and it's something that Councilmember Giarrusso and I talked about extensively. Buddy, you did say that the NOPD officers will get training.
Yes, so the NOPD officers will have to be trained on the device, how the device works, what regulations, if we're using their device. If we use DigiTicket, they're already trained on DigiTicket as it is. DigiTicket is what we give citations, municipal summons, and whatnot through. One of the things you spoke about, for instance, was the Chick-fil-A. I had been working with Mr. Joe Threat, previous administration, and communicating the problems that we're having with the frustration operations as well as the hotel. And I think some of the things that we need to think about is the innovative technology there is where there's camera poles that take these pictures. I think that there's ways that I've researched that I've seen other cities be able to do because of the less of manpower accessibility. We're able to put more pool cameras up just like we do with crime cameras or whatnot, and be able to photograph just like we do with a speed camera ticket. So there's technology out there that I'm definitely have been researching to look into. I think that's one measure, but also, like you said, staffing concerns, right? So I think we'll be in charge of how the staffing will be operating, what the hours of the complaints are, and where to manage those personnel. So I think that's one of the things that I think the council was also looking at to make sure the staffing was appropriate for the event. If I only have 2 tow wagons working Jazz Fest, it really doesn't do me much good because it takes too long to go back to the yard. So I was thinking during Super Bowl, and I got with Mr. Joe to hire the TAO operators to go out there and assist us, and it worked dividends because we were able to tow more cars during a certain time frame in that event.
Mr. Wisby, what is the effective date of this ordinance?
May 31st.
Okay, and so when will the technology concerns be resolved?
So I want to address a couple of different things here because we have a couple of timelines that are kind of intersecting. Earlier this year, the city put out a request for information for parking and curbside management services, which is inclusive of the city's ticketing devices. We received 11 responses to the RFI, which we're currently evaluating with the purpose of putting out a holistic RFP later this summer to replace the entire suite of parking and curb management functions. As part of that evaluation, as Captain Michaud mentioned, NOPD IT has reached out to us to evaluate the DigiTicket system and whether that would be a fit for this particular ticketing need. That has not been completed yet, but it will be completed within the next 1 to 2 months in advance of the scoping of the RFP, because in the RFP we'll have to detail what services the new vendor will provide versus what data sources they may need to accept data from existing systems.
So either way, no matter what, we're going to have additional training of both our current parking enforcement officers and NOPD officers who are participating in enforcement. Is that correct to say?
It certainly is correct to say that we need additional training for the newly transferred DPW employees. Lieutenant Barnes has been working closely with the Academy on that. To the degree that NOPD uses officers themselves to ticket parking infringements, then yes, we would provide that same training to them. That would be an interim solution until we get this RFP to replace the whole ensuite set of products.
Okay, and then, Buddy, when we talk about officers being able to ticket, that would be during their current shifts or if they're working special events. We're not talking about overtime in order to ticket additional folks.
So exactly what you're talking about. Mainly, we kind of put this in Captain Palumbo's district because he has the biggest concerns of parking, illegal parking in those areas. So it would be used for like the French Market, the overtime that's being done by the French Quarter, as well as regular working. No overtime specifically for that duty.
Okay, perfect. I think that's all I have. I'm really excited about this, Shannon. I know we've been talking about it forever, so kudos. Thanks.
Councilmember Green.
Captain, thank you in advance for what I know is going to be a very well done effort involving the New Orleans Police Department. I have a general concern, and I just want to express to you my support for your being as assertive and aggressive as possible. There are some areas of my district that have no problems with regards to illegally parked vehicles, but then there are some areas, such as in the 9th Ward, where vehicles are being left on the streets because they are holding drugs or other illegal weapons sometimes, too, to be very honest with you. I just want to just express to you that if you would express to the officers that some of those citations that they're going to issue and those cars that they're towing, the work that they're going to do is to help to reduce crime in our city too. It's not just a matter of the vehicles being there, it's sometimes what's in those vehicles and why people have those vehicles, especially in certain areas. I think if you go, for example, to Algemeyer and Johnny Jackson Boulevard, which you're familiar with, you'll see a total disregard for the people who live in that community. But I think that you'll also see that there is activity going on there that we as a city don't want to see happen involving vehicles and the like. And I understand that parking enforcement officers don't want to go to a situation like that. The crime that's taking place in certain areas is well documented. But at the end of the day, I want you to know how much we appreciate the work that you do, and I know that it's going to result in some successes. But those vehicles that you see parked are parked for a variety of reasons in certain neighborhoods. And let's help to reduce crime and clutter in those communities too.
Yes, sir, and I think coming on the department will also help with comms. Our comms right now is a phone call or a call to their dispatch, a call to the police department. I think that a certain particular set of comms that can immediately get access to NOPD. And also I talked to Lieutenant Barnes and talked about some training things. Maybe we do a de-escalation training with them, you know what I'm saying, or bias-free enforcement. Those things are something that we can brief these parking and tow enforcers to kind of regulate and stop a problem from happening. But we do want the police to be there to support them, and I want them to know that we're there to support them in a mission. Like, I know we did a couple missions with them, and we got great communication now. The parking on a neutral ground around these certain locations, we get in citizen complaints. We've hit a couple of spots with great success, and also we're doing our saturation patrols and DWI to help with towing to give us any kind of backup in case we have those illegal vendors and also parking concerns.
Johnny Jackson and Algemeyer. We have a new school going there, going to be dedicated in August. Young kindergartners and first graders, their parents will have to bring them by that site at all times. It's unsafe, but there are about 30 vehicles.
Yes, sir.
I know you know.
We have an abandoned vehicle check as well with DPW, and we'll implement that if we see a vehicle that's been abandoned and hasn't been serviced or has got no plates and hasn't been regulated to be on city streets. I think that we'll start stickering them and giving them a certain amount of days, and then tow them and take them to Almonaster Yard.
Thank you.
Councilor Hughes.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon, and let me thank you all for your great work. And Ms. Shannon, let me publicly thank you for always being so responsive to my office. Let me ask, I have to go back now to my question about big rigs. So will this ordinance give you all authority to ticket and boot and tow big rigs, or do we need to do something to give you all that authority?
So
that are parked in residential neighborhoods.
Right. So if there's an ordinance that it violates, like if the rig was on the curb or on a sidewalk or blocking a bicycle lane, we can tow that. That's not a problem. It depends on the particular violation, of course, and it depends on the ordinances that if the 18-wheelers are not allowed in that particular neighborhood, because we do have no truck route. So if they're in an area that has eliminated a truck route, we can take the appropriate ordinances and make sure it's enforced. And with that, also the criminal aspect of it as well.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna have my staff dig deep, but I want to let you know where I'm headed, and we'll look forward to working with you. Big rigs don't belong in any residential neighborhood. Whether it's a truck route, no truck route, big rigs do not belong in residential neighborhoods. They tear up streets. They're a nuisance. There's a whole host of reasons I can give you. Here's what I want. I want somebody in this city to have the authority to be able to go out and ticket these big rigs. It's my understanding if you're a resident, after you receive one ticket or two tickets or however many tickets that you don't pay, then you're eligible to be booted, right? So I want that same thing to apply to these big rigs. You get a ticket, you don't pay it, then you get booted or you get towed. And if you all need a specialized tow truck, I'm going to work with you to get that tow truck.
Definitely need one of those.
But we've got to change behavior. And the only way, going back to the council president's point, that we're going to change behavior, because in New Orleans East, it is out of control. These big rigs that are parking in residential neighborhoods, parking in front of Ms. Jackson's mailbox. Now the post office is passing by, she can't get her mail. I mean, it is just out of control, and we've got to do something about it.
Yes, sir.
So I look forward to working with you all.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
I want to echo what Councilmember Hughes said, and I think honestly, to your point, buddy, we're probably just going to have to draft a separate ordinance for it, because the reality is that it's one thing when you're parking your minivan on the curb too many times and you get a ticket and you get a tow, but to the council member's point, there really is no justification unless you're delivering furniture for a big rig to be parked in a neighborhood. And I think that in many of our districts, if NOPD is called out overnight and there's a big rig there, I mean, there's no reason why we can't draft a new ordinance saying complete prohibition and giving the authority for NOPD on the spot to boot the vehicle. And I think it probably is going to require us helping you get, because obviously the boots for a big rig are different than the boot on a car. Yes. So I think it's probably going to be a two-phase approach of getting you the boots and then getting the tow truck separately, but I'm happy to work with my colleagues. I think all the district council members are fairly fed up with that. I think it's, as Councilmember Willard said, there are plenty of those in Gentilly where we live as well, but we will work with you. We'll get your good friend Julia involved, and we'll figure out some new ordinance, just because I think it's just such a obvious, it's something that's obviously out of place in residential neighborhoods, and I think that in a city always looking for revenue, big rigs are very expensive. Yep. So if we get a couple of those towed to Almonaster, you'd probably get a lot of money for one of those at a sheriff's sale.
Yes, sir. And of course, we need the equipment to be able to tow it too, so that they got a fine and fee for storage fees or whatnot. But to your point, I think we're doing a great job more booting, that I've been looking at the numbers and how we're going about the booting system. I think you're going to see impacts over you would have seen impacts over the last few months about the way we're booting and the amount of collections that are coming as a result of them. But to your point, I think more of the big rig boots, we definitely have a booting crew we'll be able to put out and make sure we hit the areas of concern in the neighborhoods. But one of the underlying problems that we see is some of these communities that, I hate to say it, but it's kind of business residential.
Right.
And so that's where I fall. I'd have to really look at that ordinance as to the impact. And I agree with you. It's a site sore. They're damaging the houses. They're rocking the streets. We get those all the time. We'll go sit out there. But one thing about tow trucks, not tow trucks, but these big trucks, they talk to each other on the radio. They see us out there. Police are out there. Stay away from that. So we're gonna try to do, like you said, look at the parked vehicles and the driving in those areas.
Yeah, I think that certainly, especially with the overnight parking, I think that if, to Councilman Hughes' point, if an officer rolls out there at 10, 11 p.m. at night, looks around, no one claims the big rig, and it shouldn't be there and it shouldn't be parked. Because I think, to your point, it is problematic in the mixed areas, in that if you've got a truck stop nearby, there's a question of whether or not it should be parked there. But I think we can figure out something. We're probably going to have to figure out, I mean, to be honest, we're probably going to have to create a whole new ordinance to deal with it, just because it is always problematic when we try to shoehorn something into an old ordinance, and then we have those guys calling their companies and filing massive lawsuits saying it wasn't quite fit the definition, now you owe us money. We'll just get it done the right way. Council Vice President Willard.
Yeah, just really quickly, thank you, Captain Mishu. For me, it's really a quality of life issue, you know, what Councilmember Hughes was hitting on. And for me, it's not just the big rigs, the 18-wheelers. It's also, you know, school buses and dumpsters and pods. You know, we have so many of these things that are in our neighborhoods and residential areas that don't belong. And, you know, removing items like that can go a long way for certain parts of our city that feel, and justifiably so, that they have been historically neglected and overlooked. The big rigs in particular are problematic because they're going through the neighborhoods and tearing up the roads and, you know, blah, blah, blah. We fix it, they tear it up again. My understanding is that some of the business owners live there, and that's just where they park their truck. And that's not acceptable, right? So I certainly look forward to working with y'all and Councilmember Hughes and Council President Morell and anybody else who wants to be involved in this, because for me, it's not just the 18-wheelers, right? There's so many other things that don't belong in our neighborhoods, but that are in our neighborhoods on a consistent basis all the time, and that's not fair to people who take pride in their neighborhood. So thank y'all.
And one more thing, because I know Shannon and I have talked about this repeatedly. I look forward to you absorbing all of ground transportation because we have significant general enforcement problems. Shannon and I have beat our heads against the wall on the golf carts in the CBD forever. And the challenge has always been that under current ground transportation, they're like, well, what are we supposed to do? And I'm like, is it illegal to drive a golf cart down a city street? Yes. Okay, what authority do you need? I think it's a little different when an NOPD officer shows up and goes, get out the cart, we're throwing it away. You get a couple of those and the problem goes away. With all of these guys underneath a singular law enforcement agency, it will change the behavior. Because right now, when it's the little old lady from ground transportation, they just keep speeding by and laughing at her. When a cop steps out there and goes, get out the damn cart, suddenly they're gonna realize that the joyride is over. So I know this is the first step, as we heard from Innovation, but this is not the last step. Buddy, Dave, you guys have a lot more coming your way over time. With that, I will move. Can I get a second? Second by Councilmember Willard. Oh, sorry. Ms. Clevenger had a card. Come on in, Ms. Clevenger.
Good afternoon. I've kind of got a lot to say, but I'm going to try to condense it. First, thank you, Captain Michaud, Lieutenant Dave Barnes. You met with us so many times over the last 2 years with the Police Community Advisory Board, and last year with Fairgrounds Triangle Neighborhood Association and Unity for Safer Communities about these issues. And I generally support this ordinance, but I do have concerns. But let me back up for a second. For the support, you know that we have tried for years to address the safe streets issues on Gentilly between Bayou Road and St. Bernard, and also on Broad between St. Bernard and Bayou Road. And that a lot of those issues center around parking, illegal parking, on corners, double parking, triple parking. And on Gentilly, there's those subtle curves that where we saw 5 pedestrians hit last year, 3 during Jazz Fest on Onzaga and Gentilly, 2 at Gentilly and Castiglione. So we have talked about the idea that this needs to be a holistic approach, so I appreciate that. From the other side of it, because obviously we've called parking hundreds of times. They don't come out at night. They do not come out on weekends. They want a police escort for ABOs. Let's go to Jazz Fest. My support comes with concerns. Jazz Fest uses our residential neighborhoods as their ground transportations and parking lots. Every square foot of the fairgrounds is monetized with condos at $25K a day. We need some guardrails because our citizens, again, our residents, can't park. They have, Jazz Fest is 8 days now. There is absolutely no way to come home from work. Jazz Fest, the NOPD issued a PSA Saturday that was very concerning, talking about blocking street parking with cones and garbage cans. I think it generally badmouth residents in a very general way, and what happened Sunday, and I'm going to finish this, guys, because it criminalized some of our residents.
Thank you very much, Ms. Clevenger. We appreciate you being here today. All right, that's 6 yeas, no nays. It is adopted. I believe that is the last item on the agenda. All right, Councilman Willard moves to, Councilman Hughes moves to adjourn, second by Councilmember Harris. Please vote your machines. 6 yeas, no nays. Thank you.